doing. We'll talk about completed projects, historic resources, the SNS project, the campus plan, CEQA, the California Environmental Quality Act. We love our acronyms. But first I just want to say, and y'all saw a lot of this, is that in Measure ES, which is the bond measure that was approved in 2012, you can remember. With that, we came in and did a pretty full modernization of this campus. So that was the air conditioning, the windows, the paints, the floors, the fire alarm, the doors, accessibility, paint exterior. We've done full exterior paint since then. So we did all of those things. And we're finishing up some of the safety, security, added cameras, a Raptor system. Some of the guys you see working around are doing a bell clock and PA system, which are all very important for safety and security. So those things are happening. We have other security upgrades that are on the way. But the next thing is to have a conversation about historical resources. So Andrew, there you are.
Architectural Resources Group, ARG. We are a historic preservation consulting firm based in Los Angeles. And our firm has been working with the district these past several months on identifying historical resources on various campuses throughout the district, including Franklin. So we're really excited to be here tonight, and just wanted to take a few minutes and walk you through the work that we've done to date. So our work is it's driven by policies that were implemented by the district back in February of 2021. Specifically, we're referring to Board Policy and Administrative Regulation 7113, which states, and I'm quoting here, calls for the district, quote, to identify and clarify treatment of historical resources present on properties under its jurisdiction. So the purpose of our work is really twofold here. First is to identify what the historical resources on the campus are. And then the second component of this is to integrate the consideration of historical resources into future planning of the Franklin campus, with the understanding that campuses do need to change and evolve to a degree over time to accommodate present day and future needs. I wanted to quickly discuss the approach that we took when we were looking at this campus and trying to determine which buildings and site features, what about it is historic. So we started by reviewing existing documentation and participating in a community meeting. This was conducted in June of last year via Zoom. Several of you were probably in attendance there. From there, we conducted extensive background research and developed historic contexts, both for the district as a whole and for this particular campus. This allowed us to really understand the dynamics at play that shaped this campus into what it is today. We conducted a site visit. So a team of historians and planners from our office walked the campus. We took a careful look at all the buildings and the site features with our own two eyes. It's one thing to look at something in plan or through photos. It's another thing, as we all know, being here tonight, to actually walk the campus and take a look at things. You really experience it much differently. From there, we compiled everything into a historic resources inventory report. I'm going to throw another acronym your way, HRI. You'll probably hear that a lot. HRI stands for Historic Resources Inventory, and it's really the culmination of all the work we've done so far. So to really understand how we arrived at our conclusions, it's important to have just kind of a baseline understanding of this campus and how it came to be. So the school, Franklin Elementary School, originally opened in 1924. It consisted of a single brick schoolhouse building. This picture at the top there shows what it originally looked like. It's very formal, very traditional, as schools and educational facilities were at that time. However, this building was extensively damaged in 1933 with the Long Beach earthquake, like so many other buildings and facilities in the district. So it was taken down pretty much to nothing, and it was reconstructed in 1937 by architects Marsh, Smith, and Powell. Architects were well known for their school designs and did a lot of work in Santa Monica specifically, but really all throughout the Southern California region during this time related to the reconstruction of schools. Subsequent additions were made to the Franklin campus in 1948 and 1952. So these are some of the other buildings that you see, or you probably saw during your tour. And then in more recent years, modular and portable buildings have been added to accommodate additional growth. So Franklin is a little different than some of the other elementary school campuses within the district. So some of these other campuses, they were built all at once. They were built in accordance with a very deliberate plan, and you can see that in some of these other campuses. That was not really the case with Franklin. At Franklin, the existing buildings here today, they were constructed incrementally on sort of an ad hoc basis as resources permitted and as space was needed for additional students. As a result, there are many layers of history represented at this campus from different periods. However, these layers, kind of absent of a master plan that was guiding this, these layers of history don't really converse with one another in any sort of meaningful way. So you may have noticed this when you were walking around the campus. There's a lot of different style buildings, different scales, and this is really a reflection of the prolonged period during which this campus developed. I just wanted to show this quick graphic. It might be a little easier to visualize this. So these three buildings here in blue, these are the original buildings from the 1937 reconstruction. So this includes Building A, which is what we're in now. This is the cafetorium. Building B, which is the two-story main building out front, and then Building F, which is the long kind of classroom wing on the right side of the screen, and it's along the east perimeter of the campus. In 1948, 4 more buildings were added. This was Building C, D, E, and G, shown up here on the screen. It's kind of this orangish color. Also in 1948, Building A, so the building we're in now, was substantially remodeled. And in 1952, there was an addition to the upper story of Building B, the main building. So when it was reconstructed in 1937, Building B was taken down to 1 story, but then it was brought back up to 2 to accommodate additional growth. So when we conducted our evaluation, we looked at the campus through a number of different lenses. Just kind of by virtue of the way school campuses are, because they consist of multiple buildings and site features, it's common to look at school campuses through the lens of a historic district. So this language comes from the National Park Service, and I'm quoting again. So what is a historic district? A district, according to the National Park Service, possesses a significant concentration, linkage, or continuity of sites, buildings, structures, or objects, united historically or aesthetically by plan or physical development. So it's a lot of words, but in lay terms, this just means that there needs to be some sort of a meaningful relationship between buildings and features in such a way that they come together to create a unified whole in a sense of place. When we applied this guidance, this framework, to this particular campus, we did not believe that there is a historic district present. The buildings date to different periods, as discussed before. They were designed by different architects in different styles, and they do not appear to ascribe to any sort of deliberate plan, as is the case with many other campuses within the district. So because of all of that, we concluded that there does not appear to be a potential historic district at this campus. However, we did not stop there. We also took into account whether any of the buildings or site features on this campus appear to be individually eligible for designation as a historic resource. So there is one building on the campus that appears to be historically significant. This is Building B, the main building, the 2-story building in the front. This is the public face of the campus, and is probably the building that people are most familiar with when they think of Franklin or as they drive by on the street. So Building B was found to be individually eligible for listing in the California Register of Historical Resources. This is the state inventory of historical resources. In addition to being eligible as a Santa Monica landmark, for reasons that I'll discuss more in just a minute. I do want to emphasize that this is just a determination of eligibility. Our finding does not actually designate the building. This is a separate process that could be done in the future, but we are identifying it really for informational purposes and planning purposes moving forward. In addition to the building itself, the lawn and the landscape kind of to the front as you approach the building off of Montana Avenue was identified as a part of that historic resource. So the historic resource includes the building itself and then the lawn in front. So Building B is really significant for 2 reasons. First, it's a very tangible expression of school modernization efforts the district undertook after the Long Beach earthquake of 1933. This is a very important period of history where the district allocated a tremendous amount of capital and resources toward improving and modernizing its schools. Second, Building B is significant as a good example of the PWA modern style of architecture. This is a restrained, formal architecture that people often associate with the Great Depression and the World War II eras. And it's also architecturally significant as a notable work of master architects Marsh, Smith, and Powell. So as I discussed before, this building, when it was reconstructed, Building B was originally one story when it was rebuilt in 1937, and then that second story was re-added in 1952. So I guess an obvious question would be, why would a building that has changed so much still be considered historic? Again, we go back to guidance that comes from the National Park Service, which states, and I'm quoting again, a property can be significant not only for the way it was originally constructed or crafted, but also for the way it illustrates changing tastes, attitudes, and uses over a general period of time. So in essence, what this means is that sometimes changes to a building can acquire significance in their own right and be considered historic as well. So that guidance really does apply to this building. The second story addition from 1952 was designed by the original architects, Marsh, Smith, and Powell. Marsh, Smith, and Powell designed that upper story addition very carefully so that it would emulate the original architecture of the building and it would all really blend together, which is what we see today. So this is an instance in which changes to the building have acquired significance in their own right. And then this is reflected in what we call, in historic preservation language, the period of significance. This is really the period during which the building assumed its architectural character and is really, it's an expression of the period during which it attained its significance. And this is 1937 to 1952. So as I mentioned before, at the beginning of my presentation, this is, our work here is really twofold. The first component of our work with the district has been to identify historical resources. This is reflected in the HRI report, which is really kind of the subject of what we're talking about tonight. Moving forward, the district will be utilizing the HRI findings to inform future plan and design and environmental review. And we will be consulting with the district and its design team moving forward really to plan in such a way that historical resources are recognized and managed. And that concludes my portion of the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Excuse me. With us, we are just so excited about this opportunity. I can remember when I first came to Franklin, can't believe it was almost 5 years ago. Excuse me, we were in the process of really looking at new furniture and desks and chairs and things like that for our students. And once that happened, it was like, we were excited. So just thinking about the work that we've done over the last couple of years with this amazing architectural team, our district team. I have wonderful teachers and parents and support staff who engaged in this very thoughtful process of looking at Franklin for who we are, and not just as a set of buildings, and thank you for sharing all that historical information. That was so wonderful. But not just, their interest was not in the buildings. It was more of who we are in the buildings on a daily basis. Like we went through exercises and workshops and playing around, and this was all on Zoom, like really understanding who we are as a Franklin community and culture and what we want to do with that. How do we want to continue to shape our little ones and meet our goals and our mission within our spaces? What do we want that to look like? So I appreciate your time and your effort with really delving into that with us. And I have 3 of my amazing teachers here with me right now. I don't want to take up a lot of time. I would love for them to come up just really quickly, introduce themselves, and just share maybe 1 or 2 sentences as to how they feel having, you know, a makerspace, just that opportunity to have that makerspace, that outdoor learning space for their students. I have a first grade teacher, a third grade teacher, and a fifth grade teacher. So you can get a feeling of kind of each, right, grade span, because I know that's going to be the first big project that we're going to, you know, be able to really participate in the next, you know, year or so. So can you come up really quickly? I have Miss Ashley Borden, Mrs. Ashley Borden, excuse me. She's a first grade teacher. And I have Ms. Kristen Mowry, one of our amazing third grade teachers. And I have Ms. Dawn Silhavy. She was actually upstairs. She's one of our dynamic fifth grade teachers. We didn't get to see her classroom, her space, but she's here to join. So if you can just, like I said, introduce yourself and then just share one or a couple sentences, because the work that they do, that they're able to do in their classrooms and in their, you know, if they have outdoor space, because Ms. Sohavi doesn't have any outdoor space right now. The work they do in there now, it's like mind-blowing just to see the level of engagement and interaction and, you know, all of that good stuff. So we are envisioning and what we are really hoping and planning for. So I'm gonna stop talking. Come on up.
Hi, I'm Ashley Borden. I teach first grade here, and thank you all for coming and all for all your support. A makerspace would be huge. It would be wonderful for first graders. So those are 6 and 7-year-olds. They get spread out. They could work with groups. We could even work with another classroom. It would be wonderful to have that indoor-outdoor space to be able to do lots of great projects. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Kristen Mallory. I teach third grade. I really just believe that kids should have a space to be able to collaborate and do project-based learning. And the portables right now just don't offer the space. We really need a place that can collaborate with other teachers. And like I said, kids love science. They like STEM, they like engineering, building. I'm a big fan of science. And right now, Miss McGregor knows I'm outside. I'm taking up the recess spots to like blow up things and send things flying, test force, friction, chemical changes. There's just no place to do it. So it's just going to offer a space for the kids to go and be set up all my stuff and be able to like work with other teachers and collaborate. And also to collaborate with other teachers with theater and invite parents in and community to see. Like right now at the portable, with 27 students and 50 parents, it just doesn't offer the space that the community needs to be able to be invited in and to see all the collaboration and the project-based learning. Thanks.
I would have to agree. I'm new to this whole process. I would say this is really my second meeting, so I ditto what my fellow teachers
See, wonderful. Okay, so thank you so much, and we're going to be around until 6 o'clock, so if there are any questions specifically, we're here. Okay, thank you again for being here.
On this project is DSK, so Jeff Fuller, who is our principal, will start it off.
I'm going to keep it short. For those of you who know me, I'll talk forever, so I'm going to actually pass the charge a little bit, but we're happy to have Abby and Jonathan with my office, and then Olivia with Architecture for Education. She's our ed planner and also a great help to this whole process. But we have enjoyed working with all the teachers. We've had a lot of community meetings and PTA and things like that, and so this kind of reflects where we are today, and we're excited to go forward. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jonathan and let him talk about how this process developed.
Okay, the real challenge here is I really need to see what I'm talking about, and then use a lot of hand gestures. That's just how I work. Okay. Let's go ahead and dive in. So, Franklin's existing plan. As Andrew already discussed, we're looking here at the sort of historically relevant components on the campus. When we started the master planning process here, and even when we were doing some of the modernization work here, we looked at the main building, building B, and we're already kind of like, we're not touching that. That's how the community understands this campus. This needs to stay how it is. So the good news from a historical perspective is we are not doing anything to the facade of that building. That's already good to go. The phase one project that some of you have already heard about is obviously the makerspace and some of the work that takes place in the yard. Now the demo that's associated with that is the portables at the foot of campus right now. There's 2 half basketball courts, thank you. Actually, can I do that too? Yeah, I can do that too. 2 half basketball courts and 1 full court. Some of that ends up under the footprint of the new makerspace, and some of it is just in the way of being able to build the makerspace. And then also there are going to be some changes to the soccer field. A lot of this is because we need to get fire water into buildings on this campus, and we also need to kind of clean up some things with how fire trucks access the interior of the campus. So the new makerspace building is this kind of lambda-shaped building that we're looking at here. And then the basketball courts that we had previously removed will go back and they'll become part of kind of this new access point into campus. Right now this is actually cut off and there isn't a curb cut if you were trying to bring a fire truck in, which fire trucks can handle that, but we would like to make this a little bit better set up. And then we'll also be providing a new walking surface around the track and making some improvements to the surface of the soccer field as well. Okay, so let's talk about the makerspace. This is our first major project on this campus. It's the first project to try and implement 21st century learning. The question that we get asked a lot is, what is a makerspace? Because it's not a space that I had when I went through school, and probably a lot of the rest of us didn't either. And probably the best touch point is to think about, what if you had a room that was a science lab and an art studio at the same time? A space that was really oriented towards making and building and doing and project-based learning and getting kids into a situation where they can try things out and build things with their hands or with machines or with computers and learn across sort of multiple disciplines at the same time. I mean, one of the challenges for teachers trying to do that in their own classrooms is, if we're building an 8-foot triceratops puppet out of paper mache and a bunch of other things and learning about paleo art and all different things with dinosaurs and so on, no one has that space in their room. And no one has that space to keep it set up for a week while we do that project. So we need a space that provides the resources that will let teachers try out new things, build things, and also spend a little bit of time on it. And it doesn't always work in their existing classrooms, especially if they still have the smaller classrooms. So the makerspace that we're looking at here, here we go. So our intention with this building is actually to make it as flexible as possible. We have 2 maker studios in it, in these 2 spaces here. And these are essentially the messy, doing things, kids building stuff coming up, science experiments going on kind of spaces. And there's an additional resource center, and this is where kids can go into that room to pull the resources that they need to work on projects. But also, this room is probably going to be quieter than the main studio. So if you have a group of kids that are doing a separate research project, or they need to talk through something and it's just not working in the main space, they can sort of withdraw to that area and work on other projects, or maybe more clean kind of activity that would happen with computers might need to be in this space, so somebody doesn't get a bunch of paper mache paste in the keyboard. But overall, we want to make the space as flexible as possible, so it's ultimately the teachers that are saying how this space works and what they need to do. Now with it, we also have, in this space here, the Maker Yard, which includes a 6-inch high presentation platform for kind of dramatic things, or just talking through whatever project you've just completed and the cool thing that you made. The Maker Studio is connected inside to out with the Maker Yard. The Maker Studio 1 and the Resource Center are. So if you have a project that is either so messy it really needs to be outside, or it's just so large it really needs to be outside, or maybe it needs sunlight, it's something based with solar panels or something, you can really quickly move from inside to out and open these spaces up so that you're transitioning really easily from teaching inside to teaching outside. It's also supported by this sort of maker patio down here, which is a smaller outdoor learning area that probably has more seating and it's a little bit quieter. It's shared more specifically with the Maker Studio 2. But again, you can always sort of route through the Resource Center and use it. Maker Studio 1 and 2 are meant to be departitionable. So if you have something that's like 60 kids, crazy big project, multiple classes, a lot of stuff going on, or perhaps it's a community event, the space can serve that function as well. So this is some of the renderings and some of the plans for this project. This image here is sort of looking into the notch across the makerspace. And then this is actually an earlier rendering, sort of looking, this would be the makerspace building here, and this would be future classroom building, and this would be the future cafeteria building. And the cafeteria and the makerspace building are meant to work with each other and kind of create a shared space that kids can use. We'll get into that a little bit later in some of the later phases. So this is, if you're standing on the playground and you're looking sort of up into campus, this is that elevation of the makerspace building. And one thing that sort of begins to highlight is that this can become a community face for the makerspace as well, and something that's accessible to the community. So you might be able to do things like Franklin Gallery Night, there's just been a big art project that's done, or robot fight night, if that's what's just been done. And there's opportunities both for after-school programs, for in-school programs, and for kids to show everybody what they've been up to lately. So phase 2, and I've talked about it with some of you, is the beginning of a new classroom building, which is important to the larger process to expand classrooms until it's not just everyone needs to sit very still and face the same direction, because we can only be working on one thing at a time, there's not enough room, to classrooms that are large enough that multiple things can be happening at the same time, there's room to work on projects, and there's sort of some options for how things unfold. So this project would take out 2 existing classrooms from building F, and also one of the restrooms up to that point. And then also it's going to impact this basketball court, playground, and the handball walls, and we relocate all of these as part of this project. So this is what we end up with the first phase of that. And again, this one, as we mentioned at the time, this one isn't funded yet. This would go into the next bond. This also isn't designed yet. This is just a notion of this probably works like this. So there's a lot of discussions with the community and with the teachers to nail down exactly how this needs to work. This project begins to kind of create a quad area here that can sort of serve some outdoor learning purposes. For purposes of implementing the master plan, though, it creates 4 classrooms downstairs, 4 classrooms upstairs, new restrooms for the students and for the teachers on both floors. It sets the elevator core for this future building. It includes teaming space, so teachers can take their kids to a room spread out. Or also, if you have 2 teachers that are combining their classes to do a group project, you don't have a space that's large enough to accommodate that. Those spaces are also such that in the transition period where we're moving from a smaller campus to larger rooms and new buildings, we can get 2 classrooms into that if we need to, just to sort of act as a transitional element. So the next phase will extend the classroom building. Now that we have this new building, we have enough classrooms to take the rest of the kids out of this space and move them into other spaces, take down this building, and then sort of put up the rest of a 2-story classroom building. And again, we're going up 2 stories because classrooms are getting larger as part of implementing the ed specs. This is a pretty tight campus, and it's serving a lot of different functions, including community functions, park functions, and there's a lot of kids on it. For classrooms to get bigger, we're either going up or we're sort of gobbling up all the playground space that we have with just classroom buildings. But this also gives us an opportunity to sort of turn the campus inward, to make it safer, to help kids focus and sort of contain the activity of the campus a little better as well. So this is an early rendering of the new 2-story classroom building, L building. It just has some notions in it that there's some outdoor space, some outdoor learning opportunities here. It's not fleshed out terribly far, other than to note that there's probably some large windows and some really solid indoor-outdoor connections available with the new classroom. And again, this would be something that would be developed whenever that project comes up and is funded in the future. So the next phase, this is kind of a renovations phase. This would include the renovation of the ground floor of the main building. It would include renovation of the kindergarten building that's across the alley. And now that this building is complete, there's enough classrooms that we could take down this modular building and give that space back as outdoor learning space to the new classrooms. So for the main building, the classrooms in the main building, I think are all sub 800 feet. They're like 750. They're very small and they're not really usable as classroom spaces proper for any real purpose. So we're looking at ways to repurpose more of the first floor of the main building to administration and support and teacher support and give teachers more workroom opportunities, more places to go to the bathroom, places for PTA to have meetings, and some of those public functions of the school that need to be up towards the front end. The transitional kindergarten yard over here on the satellite campus, these classrooms are almost the right size. This is mostly a departitioning. We're taking out some of the interior walls here in order to provide large enough classrooms to meet the ed specs for the transitional kindergarten kids in those spaces. So that one kind of works out on its own. This is an early rendering of sort of one way of approaching the new main office where you come into the front of the building. This actually changes very little from how it is now. This is just the kindergarten yard, or the transitional kindergarten yard after the remodel. And then phase 5, this is where we will start looking for the cafeteria culinary area. This will take out, this building is a modular building. This is a cluster of portables. This is a playground toilet building, and the bathroom functions will actually end up moving into part of the new building so the community doesn't lose access to that. So the new kitchen and cafeteria, this is also located in a spot that it becomes something that's a shared resource with the public that could be used to gather kids after school if it's raining, if you need an outdoor space. The intent is to offer both, traditional cafeteria, kitchen, dining, but also to have culinary education as part of this space. So as this develops in a sort of thought out better, it will probably include some kitchen gardens associated with it that the kids would be involved in maintaining and tending. Yes, and it forms kind of a dialogue back and forth with the maker yard. So that kids, once they're finished eating, they can run over and see what their friends are working on in the makerspace, or they could potentially eat in the maker yard and sort of hang out there since it would be a nice space. So this is an older, this is one of the early renderings that we did of that space. And most of the concepts are still the same. We're still going to have as much indoor-outdoor connection as we can manage, and then shaded dining and some kind of back and forth with the maker yard. So this is the final master plan. And again, as Cynthia was saying, this is not something that we sort of arrived at by fiat. We're trying very hard to implement the district's education specifications and to take into consideration feedback of teachers, of PTA, of people who are eventually going to be using this space and teaching from it, and to make sure that it's something really wonderful and that will support the kind of learning that we need to offer our kids.
Great, okay. CEQA process. Julia. CEQA, California Environmental Quality Act. Okay, there's your slide. He has one slide, it'll be fine.
I could give a 2-hour lecture on CEQA. I got it all. Okay. So the next step, well, Jeff and his team and Abby and Olivia are going to be designing the first phase and working on the subsequent phases. And Andrew and his team are going to be preparing technical studies to determine potential impacts to the main building from the design of both the makerspace and the subsequent phases. We also have CEQA consultants, environmental consultants out there doing other technical studies. So one of the things that they'll be looking at is a study of the construction, noise, and air quality. Would that result in any impacts to students or the nearby residents? Would there be any release of hazardous materials due to past uses on this site or something unintended? We'll also be doing things to evaluate the aesthetics of the two-story building, setbacks, and all of those that will also be evaluated as part of the secret document. We anticipate that for this project we will prepare what's known as an initial study with a mitigated negative declaration. We anticipate that will be released late spring, early summer. That will go out for a 30-day public review period where we will have another meeting in this room where we will discuss the findings of the CEQA document. Any public comments we receive on the initial study will be, if they're sent by public agencies such as the City of Santa Monica, Fire Department, things like that. We'll send the responses directly back to them so that they can evaluate them 10 days before the board hearing. And then the last step of the CEQA process would be for the board to adopt the mitigated neg deck and the mitigation monitoring program. So those are the steps we're going to go through, and that's what we do.
Okay, great. Julian Capita, I did not introduce him. Julian, who is who works with us on our entitlements and those types of things. Okay. Questions, thoughts, comments? Okay.
So there seems to be an extreme amount of different phases
Yes.
involved here. In the first term, it seems that you're taking out 3 classes for the makerspace.
At least 4, maybe 6.
Or maybe 6, okay. Taking out 6 classes for the makerspace, which will not be classrooms for students, it will be a shared experience space.
Yes.
Okay. But then you're proposing to put in a 2-story building with more classes.
Yes.
How is the demographic makeup of Santa Monica supporting your proposal?
Great. So already we've seen decline in enrollment, which allows us to reduce the portables, the 6 portables, and still be able to support the students. The goal with the next set of buildings, the next building, the L-shaped building, is to get rid of the 4 modular classrooms and 4 more portable classrooms. So it's really getting kids out of those portables, out of those non-standard classrooms into better classrooms. The next phase that goes along, the replacement of the F building, it's the next phase. It's down the road a little bit. I think we're going to have to see where we are in some ways about enrollment. It might be that the next phase is we go to the cafeteria because that's a really important thing. We may even hold off and see where we do with enrollment in our campus. One of the big things, and I mentioned it just very, very briefly, is, and many of you all heard of this, is the other thing that's happening is the governor has passed and approved that we're now adding universal transitional kindergarten, TK, which means that in the next, so we already have transitional kindergarten for those students who were born between August 1st and December 1st. If you're turned 4 years old in that period, you get to come to school for another year. But what's happening is over the next 3 years, we're going to expand that. So if you are turning 4 years old anytime after August 1st, if you've reached 4 years old by August 1st, all kids come into this. I'm not saying that correctly, but I know there's a chart that does the exact thing. But it's basically all 4-year-olds will now be part of school as part of a beginning grade called transitional kindergarten, which will be very specific developmentally for them, different than kindergarten. It's, they have very other goals and other ways the teachers, and with our certificated and qualified teachers teaching those kids at the school campus and preparing them. So we have another grade that's being added. So we do know we have some increase there. There's also a lot of question as to what's going to happen here in the city as they work towards their housing redevelopment numbers. The state has said you need to add 9,000 units over the next 10 years, and how much that's going to impact us. So we have some, so what I want to say is when you look at this master plan, it is built with some levers that allow us, if we need to expand and grow, we have the room to do that. If we need to consolidate more, we also can do that.
I have clarifying questions, but I will let.
Okay, someone?
So it's actually a clarifying question on that too. So, these are all just proposed things, minus the makerspace that is happening. But if we realize after the first 4 part of the L is
Yeah.
built, and it needs to pivot and we're going to go do something else, how does that look, right? So we're already having an ad hoc campus, right?
Yes.
It's like some modules here, some things there. Now all of a sudden we have this like half of an L. So how does that sort of
Yeah.
go into the...
Great question. Unless Jeff has a brilliant response to that, yes, I do think that's one of our challenges. I mean, one of the things to remember is that for our current population, according to the California Department of Education, our size of our campus is about 55% of what it should be. So we're always going to be challenged with how much we push in height and density, and if we're also gonna maintain recreation space like we know we need to, as we are both with students here and for the park, for the neighborhood. It's gonna be a challenge. Yeah, I agree with that, Steve. Yes, ma'am.
So to tag onto that question and everyone's question, can you just discuss with us the funding and how you're going to fund this?
Sure. So as we've said, the makerspace is funded by Measure SMS, and that's already was passed by voters in 2018. Most of Measure SMS is allocated, so we know where it's going. We anticipate starting, we're hoping to start construction on that project in June of next year. Take a little more than a year to build. We do think we're going to need to go out for additional funding. We feel like there are some real needs here at both this campus and others.
In addition to the current SNS?
Yes.
Okay.
So we do think that most likely there will be a bond measure in our future. At this moment, I would say we might be looking towards 2024, which sort of meets our 6-year cycle. And that would fund at least the L-shaped building and some other improvements. We're not really sure. It depends on how it all gets divvied up, among the other campuses. We do know the next big thing on this campus is to get that classroom building to replace the portables. After that, probably we're down another 6 years or another point of time in the future. But, that all has to be decided by the board and the community and the voters. So.
I'm sorry, so the building F, the strip of F, cafeteria and all that is a whole nother vote, a whole nother request?
It could be, or I would say all of it, all that we've shown you will not get done in the next bond measure. So something would have to be after that, which is why we talk about it being a 15-year plan as opposed to let's get it done. I mean, it would not even be, even if we had the money, it would be practical to go a whole lot faster because we have to do it in sequence because we still have school operation operating.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. We go here and then I'll go back to you, Kat.
I was going to ask on the topic of the bonds. I've only lived in Santa Monica for a couple of years now, so since after I moved here after whatever the last bond was passed, what does that mean? Like when a bond passes, like how is that paid, and like what is the per person or per household contribution, and how is that levied?
Right. It's based on your property taxes, so your assessed value. So whatever, your assessed value, and that's a fun thing here in this town. If you bought recently, your assessed value is probably higher than your neighbor who's lived here for 40 years, but it's based on your assessed value. And as you know, you pay property taxes essentially 1% of what your assessed value is, and that can only go up an increment. On that 1%, a percentage of that, so right now in Santa Monica, you're paying like 7% of that 1% for school bonds. And what happens with each of them, they accrue, and there's an arc that happens where we're paying them off, because they're essentially a 30-year mortgage for these facilities. So the bonds are paid off over 30 years, and some of them that we had, the earlier ones, Measure X, and others are ending and completing, and then these others are growing. And there's a lovely chart that I could show you. And sometime when we talk about bonds, there is something that could be shown, but it does show what that impact is. Yeah.
But does it increase the property taxes, or it keeps them the same, but just a chunk of them gets diverted into the bond?
It doesn't. The voted measure does increase the property tax, and that's what the voters do. Is they say we would agree to be taxed more to support our educational facilities. And I'm going to turn to Steve Massetti, our bond program manager, who can do this even better than I can.
You're doing fine, but I think there was another part of this question, which was how much is it? And Measure SMS, as well as ES before that, were capped at $30 per 100,000 of assessed value. So that's $30 per year per 100,000 assessed value. I know that Carrie, I think, answered the rest of your question, but that part is something I think you want.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Where should we start? And of course, we all had our varying opinions. But the teachers and us as, as educators, we're thinking about our kiddos and their current need and kind of what our future, thoughts are as far as education is concerned. And a lot of what we're doing now is all about innovation, engagement, outside learning, exploration, critical, like all these different, engaging opportunities with other students, being able to collaborate with other teachers and students. We need space for that. And so to be able to take a space, at one point we're doing science, and the next point we're doing, theater and art. My teachers were like, yes, because they're making that happen in their classrooms, but it's extremely challenging in the space that we have now. And then, we're also a green school, so we're all about, teaching the students about, recycling and being, global citizens and things like that. So they spend a lot of time outside, and to be able to have that opportunity and what the makerspace is going to be, a lot of that is going to be that outside learning and engagement with the actual, space that we have there. So the one thing that we were really talking about is the fact that, as he said, 6 classrooms, where are our kids going to go? So they're like, Cynthia, what are you going to do about that, right? So that was one of the things that we had to talk about. And as Carrie shared, our enrollment has gone down drastically in the last year. So we have the space, that's something that we have to think, I have to be very mindful about, where placement's going to be, but I'm not concerned about that at all. I know that's been a question, on some of the parents who've come to me, what do you know about this? So I'm not worried about that because we do have the space. But as far as that makerspace is concerned, my teachers are very excited about it. They're big STEAM teachers from K through 5. So the thought of being able to have those science projects and those math explorations, they're just very excited about it, and robotics and stuff like that. So that will allow for that opportunity.
Thank you, Cynthia.
You're welcome.
The other factors that went into this, and I mean, if you want a more full thing than Jeff or one of them can talk about, there's a little bit of what comes first and what steps we can take. And this, so we had to sort of go, well, if we started with this one, then that one, then, it's like, so it's a puzzle. And this was a good first step. And then the last major thing is, we have in Measure SMS around $98 million remaining for these elementary and middle school projects. And we had to figure out which projects would, and this was sort of, we didn't really have a lot more money to go for a bigger project here if we did other projects at the other sites. So it was a balance that our facility district advisory team had a long discussion about. Board facility subcommittee, then eventually the board said, these are our SMS projects. So, anyone else have a question? Comment? Concern? Yes?
Well, I guess I do have a question.
Go ahead.
Going back to one of the pictures of the new makerspace and then the new field, right now we have a gate that limits, the campus is open technically on weekends for soccer teams and like that. But sort of where
I'm going
is
to,
that? Oh, yeah.
I'm going to the one that is the when this is done.
Keep going, go the other direction.
Back this way, forward. See, I should ask the architect. This one?
Yeah.
To the, go to the end.
Oh, the end end?
Oh,
Okay. Well, this will show you. So this is after some things were removed, because I was trying to show them where it is. We're trying to speak where it is before we do that.
okay.
Okay.
So the
Go back.
makerspace will still be out here, and we'll still be blocking off entry here like we do now
Okay.
during the break. So it's going to be out in the middle. And this area will also be usable space.
Got it. So for
Yeah.
the public.
Yeah, for the public during playground partnership.
And it's not shown in this diagram as, we're still developing everything, so we are thinking about that fence line and where it will go. But yes, the idea is that there is access to the community.
So we mentioned maybe could maybe moving it here, but I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but we're asking that question because we do appreciate how important the area is for park space. In the playgrounds that we do. That's all part of the balance. Any other questions? Check. We have more time if you have anything, any worries.
What's the capacity for the makerspace? total, like those open for two, both of them.
The two maker studios together are a little over 2,400 square feet. And then the resource center is about 1,100 square feet, but that won't be as partitionable. You couldn't really do all three, but you could get the two total.
And our standard classrooms are about 1,000. Most of the ones here on campus are less than that, but so you can see that you can put almost 2 full classrooms in each of the maker spaces, plus into the and even if part of what's real is I think maker spaces is something we should always do and we shouldn't give them up. But the pendulum swings on education. But if we needed to, these are very adaptable spaces to go back to being regular classrooms or met-up classrooms, whatever that means, when everybody's just wearing goggles and headsets and bumping into each other. Because, we don't know where education's going, we just know it's going to change. So. If you don't ask any more questions, I'm going to have to let you go early. Okay, I'm not going to squeeze it. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Your input is really great. If you have any more things to write up and put up on our boards or something you'd like Kelsey to write down, we'd be happy. We really appreciate this feedback. The next steps, we're sort of moving forward with our campus plan, but with that, we will have further discussions on the campus plan. We're going to be then going to work with the Facility District Advisory Committee. We'll be going to the board to sort of say, yes, this is what our campus plan is, which really allows our CEQA process to really kick into full force. And that's going to be coming sort of, in the spring. But at the same time, we've moved into design development. And so there's a lot more meetings and discussions that are happening on the design of the SMS projects. And we focus a lot on the makerspace. I think we have to do a little more work on the field stuff. And so that's going to be, and we're going to try to get those field users and those people to have some input. So there's some input that has to happen to get us to a point where we can complete the designs, put them into the Division of State Architects so that can be approved. So we'll be ready to start next June. So that's our process, and then we'll keep developing on our master plan. If it does look like we're moving forward with some projects, we might start pre-designing some projects prior to like another bond measure. So we're then going to be in design for the next thing, which allows us to move and be ready to, as quickly as we can, and get students into better educational facilities, which completely is the goal. Last statement?
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you for
Thank you so very much.